The district attorney in Los Angeles says the two brothers, Eric and Lyle Menendez, should be resentenced for the killing of their parents in their Beverly Hills home in 1989.
After being in jail for 3 decades, the Menendez brothers might actually have a chance to get out. What they did was so horrible that they were given a life sentence with no chance of parole. But now, suddenly, the DA is pushing for a resentencing. If the request gets approved, the brothers could be eligible for parole. So why is this happening after 35 long years? And what exactly did they do that was so terrible it got them locked away for life in the first place? Secrets of the Menendez family. Let's see what the Menendez brothers did to end up in jail in the first place. And let us warn you beforehand, it is not some simple case. This story has it all: wealth, secrets, a shocking crime, and a courtroom drama that captivated the nation for years. Meet the Menendez family: Jose, Kitty, and their 2 sons, Lyle and Eric. They lived in a Beverly Hills mansion, enjoying a life that seemed perfect on the outside. Jose was a successful entertainment executive, and the family had more money than most people dream of. They had luxury cars, a massive house, and they were part of the Beverly Hills elite. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. Jose was known to be controlling and demanding. He used to push his sons to excel in sports and academics. Kitty was said to be emotionally unstable, often turning a blind eye to what was happening in the family. It was the classic rich and famous but dysfunctional story. Then, on the night of August 20th, 1989, the facade shattered. The Menendez brothers, 21-year-old Lyle and 18-year-old Eric, did the unthinkable. They shot their parents, Jose and Kitty, with shotguns in the family's living room. It was brutal. 15 rounds were fired in total. Jose was shot in the back of the head while sitting on the couch, and Kitty, who tried to flee, was shot multiple times until she was dead. After the murders, the brothers called 911, acting distraught. They claimed they had just come home to find their parents killed. But as the police investigated the scene, things didn't add up. The police initially suspected a mob hit because of how brutally the murders were carried out. It didn't fit the typical domestic violence pattern. They thought it had to be a professional job. That's partly why it took so long for the suspicion to fall on Lyle and Eric. But then they noticed something that made them suspicious. You see, right after the murders, Lyle and Eric went on a massive spending spree. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, luxury cars, fancy watches, trips, and even a restaurant they bought. It was like they thought they had hit the jackpot, not lost their parents. Naturally, this raised some eyebrows. Who goes on a shopping spree after their parents are brutally murdered? Suspicion began to fall on the brothers, and as the pressure built, they both cracked. It was Eric who confessed first, telling his therapist everything. And just like that, the brothers were arrested in March 1990. The police found the tapes from Eric's therapist. It turns out Eric had confessed to his therapist about the murders, but Lyle found out and threatened the therapist to keep quiet. The therapist's girlfriend came forward with the information, and that's what led to their arrest. The tapes of those therapy sessions became a crucial part of the trial, revealing the brothers' struggle between guilt and justification. So, what happened in the trial? How did the jury find them guilty? The trial of the century. The trial began in 1993, and it was a media circus. The prosecution argued that this was cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Their motive was money. According to the prosecution, the Menendez brothers were tired of their controlling father and wanted their inheritance. They believed the brothers had planned the murders for months, buying shotguns out of state to avoid suspicion. There were some shocking moments during the trial. First, there was the testimony from both brothers, giving graphic details of the alleged abuse. They cried, they pleaded, and they insisted they were driven to murder out of sheer terror. This testimony split the jury and the public. Some believed them, and others thought it was a desperate attempt to escape justice. The defense presented experts who supported the abuse claims, explaining how trauma could lead to such a violent act. The prosecution, on the other hand, called it a manipulative ploy, accusing the brothers of fabricating the story to gain sympathy. In the first trial, the jury was deadlocked. and the case ended in a mistrial. Half of the jurors believed the brothers deserved a lesser sentence for manslaughter due to the abuse, while the other half thought they were guilty of first-degree murder. Then came the second trial in 1995. This time, the judge did not allow the same evidence about abuse that had been presented in the first trial. The defense's hands were tied, and they could not present the full scope of the alleged family history. The focus shifted more toward the cold, hard facts: two wealthy young men who shot their parents and then went on a spending spree. The jury found them guilty of first-degree murder, and both brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That's when the Menendez brothers disappeared from the public eye, locked away in separate prisons. One of the most debated points is whether the brothers were really motivated by money. Prosecutors highlighted their spending spree as evidence of a financial motive, pointing out that they burned through over $1 million in just 6 months after the murders. They also noted that the brothers had tried to change their father's will before the killings, which was a big red flag. But the defense argued that the spending was just a bizarre way of coping with trauma. They claimed the brothers didn't end their parents' lives for money, but out of desperation and a twisted sense of freedom from their abusive father. They said the brothers believed they would be killed by their father if they didn't act first. The jury was not going to believe any of this nonsense, so they sentenced the brothers for a lifetime in jail without parole. Once convicted, the brothers were sent to separate prisons to serve their life sentences. They were completely cut off from each other for over 20 years until they were finally reunited at the same facility in 2018. Now, out of nowhere, the DA is pushing for a resentencing of the Menendez brothers. Why is that? What new evidence has come to light after 35 years? DA pushes for a second chance. This sudden move was made by the Los Angeles District Attorney, George Gascon, who is now suggesting that the Menendez brothers deserve a second chance. Gascon made headlines when he announced his decision to recommend a resentencing for Eric and Lyle Menendez, who have been locked up for over 30 years. He is not saying the brothers should walk free without any conditions, but he is suggesting that their life sentences without parole should be changed to life with the possibility of parole. This would make them eligible for a parole hearing, which means they could potentially get out, depending on what the court decides. So, what's behind this change of heart? Well, Gascon explained that his office spent a lot of time reviewing the case, hundreds of hours in fact. He pointed out that not everyone in his office agrees with the decision, but he believes the Menendez brothers have changed during their time in prison. According to him, they have gone from being notorious figures in a highly publicized murder case to role models for rehabilitation. Now let's look at some of the reasons he gave. In the press conference, Gascon made it clear that the focus was not just on the original crime. He said that under the law, the question of resentencing is not all about what they did back then. It is about who they are now and if they have been rehabilitated. He mentioned that both brothers were 19 and 21 when the crime happened. He believes that their youth, combined with claims of childhood abuse, justifies another look at their case. Gascon highlighted how, despite their original sentence giving them no hope of release, Eric and Lyle didn't waste their time in prison. They didn't join gangs or become violent. Instead, they worked to improve themselves and their environment, creating programs for inmates, getting involved in education, and helping others deal with trauma. For Gascon, this was enough to show that they had changed and deserved a chance to be heard by a parole board. Gascon also mentioned some pretty impressive stat that his office has resentenced over 300 people, and only 4 have reoffended. And those 4 cases involved technical violations, not violent crimes. In his view, that's a solid track record that suggests giving second chances can work. But why the sudden change? Why is the DA, after all these years, pushing for a chance at freedom for the Menendez brothers? There is no simple answer, but a few things stand out. First, it is worth noting that this announcement came just 12 days before a major election. Gascon is up for re-election as the Los Angeles District Attorney, and let's just say the polls are not looking great for him. He is down by about 30 points. Naturally, some critics argue that his decision is politically motivated. They suggest that recommending the Menendez brothers for resentencing is a move to gain support or make a splash right before voters hit the polls. But Gaskin himself has denied that politics played any role in his decision. He insisted that his team had been reviewing the case for over a year, carefully going over every detail before reaching this conclusion. In his press conference, he even mentioned that he made the final decision just an hour before speaking to the press, implying it was a last-minute but well-considered choice. Then, there is the undeniable fact that the Menendez case has recently exploded back into the public eye. In the past year, the story has been featured in several high-profile documentaries and TV dramas, including Netflix's Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story. These shows introduced the case to a whole new generation, and suddenly, there is renewed sympathy for the brothers. Some of the most vocal supporters include celebrities like Kim Kardashian, who has spoken out about the case on social media, calling for the brothers' release. This wave of media attention didn't just get the public talking, it put pressure on the DA's office to take another look. According to Gassoon, his office was overwhelmed with information requests and public interest in the case. Instead of waiting until the scheduled court date in November, he moved the decision up, hoping to be as transparent as possible. Now, while Gaskin and his team are moving toward a resentencing, the Menendez family itself is split. Earlier this month, over 24 relatives from the Menendez family came forward, making a public plea for Eric and Lyle to be released. They argue that the brothers were victims themselves, enduring years of severe abuse by their father, Jose. Kitty Menendez's sister, Joan Anderson van der Molen, said that decades ago, the world was not ready to hear that young men could be victims of sexual abuse. She firmly believes that if a jury heard the case today, the verdict would have been very different. But not everyone in the family agrees. Kitty Menendez's brother, Milton Anderson, strongly opposes the idea of release. Through his lawyer, he called the brothers cold-blooded, reminding everyone just how brutal the crime was, because, well, Jose was shot 6 times, Kitty was shot 10 times, including a final shot to her face after Eric reloaded the gun. Anderson feels that their actions devastated the family and left behind a trail of pain and grief. He believes they should stay in prison for the rest of their lives for what he calls a heinous act. Gaskin's decision comes at a time when public opinion on the case is sharply divided. In the 1990s, the Menendez brothers were widely seen as spoiled rich kids who murdered their parents for money. But today, things are not so black and white. Recent documentaries and TV shows have put the focus back on the allegations of abuse, and they are gaining more sympathy than ever. Adding to the drama, the Menendez brothers themselves filed a motion in May 2023, asking for their convictions to be reconsidered. They brought forward new evidence that they believed was overlooked in the original trials and argued that their past sentences were unjust, given the context of abuse. Gaskin said his team had been reviewing this motion for over a year before he decided to recommend resentencing. It is not like he is suddenly forgetting what they did. He openly acknowledged in the press conference that the murders were horrible and that there is no excuse for murder. But he is arguing that, given their age at the time, the abusive household they grew up in, and their positive behavior in prison, a second look is justified. So what is the general opinion about the resentencing of the Menendez brothers? Should the Menendez brothers get a shot at freedom after more than 30 years behind bars? To free or not to free? One of the biggest reasons supporters argue for resentencing is the brothers' impressive track record in prison. Eric and Lyle have been model inmates, showing genuine efforts to turn their lives around. They have pursued education. Lyle earned a degree in prison, and Eric became involved in self-improvement programs. They have also made positive contributions to the prison community, creating support groups for other inmates dealing with trauma, and helping to establish initiatives like the Green Space Project, which is aimed at improving the prison environment. All of this points to rehabilitation, something the justice system supposedly values. Another key point is the brothers' age at the time of the crime. Lyle was 21, and Eric was only 19 when they committed the murders. In today's legal system, youthful offenders are often treated differently, given the understanding that young brains are still developing and capable of change. Many argue that if the Menendez brothers were sentenced today, they would likely receive a different, less severe sentence, especially considering their age and potential for rehabilitation. Then there is the issue of abuse, which has been at the center of this case since day one. The defense has always maintained that the brothers were driven to commit the murders due to years of severe sexual and emotional abuse at the hands of their father, Jose Menendez. They claim that this abuse created a deep sense of fear and desperation, leading them to act violently. While not everyone believes this story, some mental health experts have supported the idea that trauma can cause people to behave in extreme ways. For many, this abuse is a mitigating factor that should be taken into account. On the other hand, many believe that the brothers' crime was too brutal to ignore. Jose was shot 6 times, and Kitty was shot 10 times, including a final shot to the face after Eric reloaded his weapon. The murders were not a sudden act of rage, they were premeditated. Critics argue that the sheer brutality and the planning involved make it clear that the brothers deserve to remain in prison for life. A lesser sentence, they say, would minimize the severity of what they did. There is also the issue of how the brothers acted right after the crime. Instead of laying low, they went on a wild spending spree, burning through their parents' money like it was going out of style. They bought expensive watches, luxury cars, and even opened a restaurant. This post-crime behavior played a big role in their original trial, as prosecutors used it to argue that the murders were motivated by greed, not fear or desperation. While the brothers have maintained that the murders were a desperate response to years of abuse, not everyone is convinced. Some legal experts and members of the public remain skeptical about the claims, suggesting that the story was exaggerated to gain sympathy. The fact that the abuse evidence was heavily restricted during the second trial has only added to the controversy, leaving many unconvinced that the brothers should receive any leniency. Finally, there is the question of justice for the victims, Jose and Kitty. Many believe that the original sentence, which was life without parole, should stand to honor their memory and the pain suffered by those they left behind. Kitty's brother, Milton Anderson, has been vocal about his belief that the brothers' actions were cold-blooded and that they don't deserve a second chance. For those who see the Menendez brothers as dangerous murderers, resentencing feels like a betrayal of the original verdict. So, what's the current status of the case? What happens next? What's next for the brothers? Well, the DA has made his recommendation for resentencing, but that does not mean it is a done deal. The next steps involve a series of legal hurdles, starting with a judge's decision. A judge will review the DA's recommendation and decide whether or not to proceed with resentencing. If the judge agrees, the Menendez brothers will be eligible for a parole hearing. At this stage, the focus shifts from whether they committed the crime to whether they have been rehabilitated enough to be released safely into society. If resentencing goes through, the case moves to the parole board, which has the final say. The parole board will examine the brothers' prison records, their behavior, and any contributions they have made while incarcerated. They will also consider the statements from the victims' families and any objections. If they decide to grant parole, the brothers could be released, but it would not happen immediately. It is a lengthy process that involves careful evaluation. So what are the possible outcomes? If resentencing is approved, the brothers might finally get a chance at parole after more than 3 decades. Their future, if released, would involve strict parole conditions, ongoing monitoring, and a major adjustment to life outside prison. They have been in jail for so long that the world they knew is completely different now. But if the judge or parole board rejects the resentencing, it is back to square one, serving life without parole. What do you think? Do they deserve a second chance, or do they deserve to rot in jail for the rest of their lives? Tell us your opinion in the comments below. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more shocking updates on this case. We will see you in the next video.